the womb formed a template of who we believe we are, about how we see other people and our place in the world. When I see human faces, I see beauty, I see tremendous suffering, and enormous potential for transcendence. A Greek playwright wrote that the gods created us, human beings, so that we have to suffer into truth. Our job as human beings is to learn from our suffering. We don't have to keep perpetuating pain for ourselves and inflicting suffering on others. In working with so many people, I've learned that working through trauma can teach us so much wisdom and can reveal the beauty of our existence that because of trauma we had lost sight of. My name is Gabor Maté. I'm a retired medical doctor, and these days I travel the world speaking and teaching about child development, health, illness, stress, and trauma. And speaking about trauma is really part of the zeitgeist these days, and I'm very passionate about it for a simple reason. Because in 30 years or more of medical practice and of addiction medicine, what I found was that the common template for virtually all afflictions, mental illness, physical disease, is in fact trauma. And there's a wisdom in trauma. When we realize that our traumatic responses and imprints are not ourselves, and that we can work them through and thus become ourselves. Virtually every week there's a study that more and more people are needing or seeking help for mental health issues. More and more youth are diagnosed with anxiety. Many more kids are diagnosed with the whole plethora of childhood conditions such as ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Depression is rising. Youth suicide is rising. Addictions are rising. Genuinely, it's an epidemic. 20% of youth or more are now diagnosable with anxiety, according to all the recent studies. That's 1/5. And those are all the people who are sufficiently anxious to be diagnosed. Well, we're talking about an epidemic.
When you grow up in a circumstance like I grew up, you're waiting for somebody to scream at you. You're waiting for something to be thrown. You don't know if you're going to eat. You don't know if you're going to be evicted. So you're constantly anxious and stressed. I used to think this was a rarity. But when I talk to people, a huge number of people have these traumatic experiences as a child that they carry with them. It's like a monkey on your back.
Trauma is an overwhelming threat that you don't know how to deal with. So trauma is not the bad things that happen to you, but what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you.
My father father was shot and killed on December 25th, 1999. They found his body in someone's front yard. So essentially, I didn't have anybody to raise me, so I was raised in the juvenile court system. I've lived on the streets since I was 10 years old by myself. The law didn't scare me, and I mean, they could have locked me up, and what's the difference? Nobody out here is gonna miss me.
My mother, alcoholic, bad alcoholic. Blame my father, sex addiction. His sex addiction ruined our whole family. You know, cheating caused divorce. I started heroin at 26. That's what really destroyed me. It just takes the pain away. I tried building my dream so many times. I don't really have a dream no more.
So trauma fundamentally means a disconnection from self. Why do we get disconnected? Because it's too painful to be ourselves. That then becomes a lifelong dynamic. I no longer know how to deal with emotions. It means that in relationships, when I feel a bit hurt, I immediately withdraw, so I don't have to feel those emotions that I don't know what to do with. So there's a disconnect. It also means that when I have gut feelings, I don't follow them. So I create situations of risk for myself. Now, trauma also affects how our brains develop. Certain key brain circuits that have to do with how we react and respond and regulate ourselves, how we handle stress, how we interact with other people, how much empathy and insight that we have, how much compassion we have. These functions of the midfrontal cortex are limited and constricted by trauma because we now know that the brain develops an interaction with the environment. So the brains of traumatized children don't look like the brains of non-traumatized children.
You can take it.
I've had enough of your crap. You're gonna start acting like a young man instead of a toddler.
As a matter of fact, her ass is on punishment right now, and she ain't even gonna go the fuck back outside.
What the fuck are you doing, Dad? I swear to God.
No,
There's
please.
no other way for you to learn this.
Dad, please stop.
During your first 18 years of life, if a parent or other adult in the household often or very often would swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or threw something at you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured, step inside the circle. If you often felt that no one in your family loved you, step inside the circle. Step inside the circle.
I think society got prison wrong, and they're seeing what's wrong with people instead of what happened to people. Our mission at Compassion Prison Project is to transform communities and prisons with compassionate action. An adverse childhood experience is a terrible event that continues to happen to a child. And there's no way to know when it's going to happen again, which puts the kid into a hypervigilant state. I have 8 of those ACEs, and when I found out I have 8 adverse childhood experiences, and that my behavior was a direct result of the trauma that I experienced in childhood, it changed my life. The men and women in prison, 64% of them have 6 or more of those.
Hi, Gabor. Monique. Hi, Gabor. I feel like I'm in a throne. I want to talk to you guys about why you think you got addicted, about what may happen to you as a child, the way you saw yourself as being deficient somehow.
I was kidnapped at 16 and sold off. So that's a trauma that's just something that's in my life that you can't turn around, right? And
Kidnapped by who?
there's a taxi driver who took me and a girlfriend when we were 16 and held us for 6 months in a motel and sold off my virginity.
And the police was looking for you all that time, and
Well, my mom just thought that I had run away from home, so she didn't look for me.
so they didn't look for you.
No.
I really need your permission to continue or not to continue.
It's okay, I'll give you permission.
The taxi driver knew exactly who to kidnap. The predator can always tell who is without protection. Anybody hate you as a child?
Yes, my father. He would spank us and take a belt to us.
Do you remember how that felt to you?
Like, I just remember the pain of it. Instead of thinking, oh, why did I deserve this? I just remember the pain and the...
And how long did that go on for?
Went on until I was approximately 16 and started fighting back.
So 10, 11 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say you're the mother of the 5-year-old, and this 5-year-old is being hit with a belt. And she's in pain. She doesn't understand, you know, and it just hurts. And it hurts emotionally. Because this man who's supposed to love me is beating me. So when you're being hit like that, there's only two possibilities. My father's a bad person or hates me, or I'm a bad person. So your only protection is to believe that, oh, I'm not lovable. Let's say you're the mother of the 5-year-old. Who would you want that 5-year-old to talk to?
Myself.
Okay, who did you talk to?
Nobody.
That's the trauma. In other words, by the time you're 5 years old, you're completely alone. What I'm suggesting really, Alicia, is that your mother was traumatized too. Do you know anything about her childhood?
And she was abused as a child as well from an alcoholic father.
You see, she learned in her childhood not to pay attention to her feelings. That's the only way she could survive.
Yeah.
So the reason she didn't know is not because she didn't love you, but because she herself was shut down inside. And that's what I'm saying, it's multi-generational. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. You can't pick out who's at fault here. It didn't begin with anybody. It goes on and on and on, from one generation to the next.
We were talking about the effects of slavery on our behavior. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I ain't agree with it when I first heard it. But then when he talked about the discipline, I had a flashback of how I used to get whipped with a bullwhip, naked. I didn't put the two and two together, but I realized, you know, that's how slaves was whipped. Because it was generational trauma passed on from one mother to another mother to another mother, and it passed on to me. I still got marks on my legs and stuff behind that. And I just remembered there was no one I could run to, no one could help me. And she just was telling me how much she loved me, and she cried and she beat me with a bullwhip.
He's a best-selling author of 4 books published in 12 languages, sold on 5 continents. Please welcome Dr. Gabor Maté.
I actually wrote my speech out tonight, which I don't usually do, but maybe out of nervousness in front of this group of strong women. You know, we all. The truth is that guys are afraid of women. I don't know if you realize that, but that's a lot of the stuff that we do is totally out of fear. Well, when you felt bad as a kid, who did you speak to? When the pain is there and there's no one to share it with, then the child because very limited resources to deal with that. And what they do is they disconnect from themselves. When you disconnect from yourself, you no longer have yourself. You've lost yourself. When we talk about trauma, we usually think of something terrible happening to a person. But that's not the only trauma there is. And so the other kind of trauma may not have to do with terrible things happening to you.
Most people look at my childhood and, damn, you had an awesome, childhood, and because I had everything, we come from upper middle class, and in Idaho, and I got everything given to me, but that was their way of parenting. They'd give me everything so I'd shut up and wouldn't bug them, because they're always too busy, they're always working.
So children don't get traumatized because they get hurt. Children get traumatized because they're alone with the hurt.
I'm a lifer inmate. I'm here on a first-degree murder. I committed my crime when I was 20 years old. And I asked myself, what events in my life brought me to the point where I could think that it's okay to take a human life? And it had to do with a lot of adverse childhood experiences. My main one as to why I started going downhill was being abandoned by my father. I looked up to him. I wanted to be just like my dad. He was my hero. But when I turned 8 or 9 years old, he got deported to Mexico. And that devastated me. As a kid, my mom used to tell me, mijo, pray to God that he'll come back. But he never came.
A baby that you don't pick up will actually die, even if you feed them and you change them and look after them, because they get overwhelmed by their feelings and they get overstressed. And so the baby needs the mother's and the father's brain to regulate her own brain, to regulate their emotions. It's not just that you're overwhelmed, it's also there's nobody there to hold you. There's a huge school of thought in North America that teaches mothers to help their babies sleep by ignoring their crying. Never mind the mother's milk. The infant just wants to attach, because the only way the infant can attach is physically. When he's not being held, he's not being attached to. When that's done night after night after night, that's traumatic. And we're still telling mothers to do that. If you actually look at genuine human needs, if you connect to God and the heart and the soul, then there's nothing more normal than a child sleeping in the arms of the parent. So I've often thought about the sources of my own issues. An infant, 2 months of age, in Hungary, when the Germans, the Nazis, marched into our country and they began to exterminate the Jewish population. So that was my first year of life, with a terrorized mother, grandparents killed in Auschwitz, a father away in forced labor, anti-Semitism, the ever-nearing shadow of annihilation, and ultimately a separation from my mother. I was a little short of 1 year old when my mother had to hand me to a stranger in the ghetto of Budapest and send me away to some relatives in hiding, so we didn't see each other for 6 weeks. And she didn't know if she would live or not. In her diary, she said that this was the hardest 6 weeks of her life. That was the experience of the first nearly year and a half of my life. And sometimes I thought, well, gee, I must have received a lot of love at the same time, otherwise it would be a lot more crazy than I actually am. For trauma to happen, you don't need Second World War, and you don't need racism, and you don't need genocide, and you don't need the privations of war. You just need parents who are so alienated from their own gut feelings that they will let their infants cry without picking them up, and that child is desperate for a relationship. That's all it takes.
Well, hi.
Alice, hello.
Welcome.
Hi, Gabor.
Welcome, Gabor.
Wow. What a view.
Thank you. For me, being a drug addict, the deep down need to escape, I think is almost into a more realistic place than the insanity that we see, the chaos we see around us. You know, I just wanted that place all the time. I can really talk for the 37 years I've been recovered and have had slips. In the program, quote, AA.
And what's the fear?
Well, the fear is I'll be abandoned. You know, it's back with the Homo sapiens. I'll be thrown out of the cave.
What is your fear of being abandoned?
Well, naturally that I'll die unless I do all of this stuff for other people.
When you do all this stuff for other people, what are you doing to yourself?
I'm abandoning me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're actually enacting your worst fear.
I was the youngest of 5, very ambitious family, very successful,
Yeah.
except everyone's alcoholic. I go in the bar, they're drinking. There's no room for me. It's like, oh, shut up, Allison, shut up. You're wrong, you're wrong. So my job was to be wrong in the family. I'll never forget my mother, you know, saying to me, I just don't understand you. And I was 6 years old, and I thought, my God, if you don't understand me, I'm lost.
Allow me to give you another perception of you. You're the one that more than others absorbs all the pain and stress in the family. And then you manifest it. And they can't stand seeing it. So in exiling you, they're exiling their own pain and stress.
Right.
Okay. As a child, we have 2 fundamental needs. One need that's with us is in infancy, and it's absolute and it's not negotiable, is attachment. And so the other need then is authenticity. Authenticity, therefore, is the connection to ourselves. Because without authenticity, without a connection to our gut feelings, just how long do you survive out there in nature? So authenticity is not some new age, pseudo-spiritual concept. It's actually a survival necessity. What happens if in order to survive or to adjust to your environment, you have to suppress your gut feelings? You have to suppress your authenticity. So normal society does not allow anger, and the child who's angry must be separated. In other words, we have to threaten his attachment relationships on which his life depends, so that he can suppress his emotions. Well, that child, if he learns the lesson well, will disconnect from their anger. And then he's a sitting duck for depression, mental illness, or for physical illness. Okay, so kid is angry. Well, how about helping him move through the anger to learn how to modulate it? Not to repress it, but to learn to become friends with it. We don't want people who are not angry. We want people who know that anger doesn't have to be destructive. What were you pushing down when you were depressed? Get the fuck out.
Anger.
Right. You were pushing down your anger.
Rage.
You were pushing down your anger,
Yeah.
right? Can you see how why, for a 6-year-old, it might be a really brilliant idea to push down the rage?
Yeah.
Why?
Survival.
Exactly. You talked about your many failures. I just want you to pick one.
The fear, if left on my own, I won't get out of bed. I've done that before.
And you regard that as a failure?
Falling apart, I regard as a failure.
You regard that as a failure?
Right.
Okay. So your failure is that you got depressed and, as you put it, you fell apart. Is that the failure?
Yeah.
Just identify the age that you first recall being depressed at.
Probably about 6 or 7.
How old are your kids now?
My oldest daughter's 33, my son is 30, and my youngest daughter's 27.
Okay. Choose one as a thought experiment right now. And I want you to imagine them at age 7. Let's say they get depressed. would you go to them and say, you are a total failure?
Of course not.
Why not? Notice you're calling yourself a failure. I'm going to say something radical to you.
Okay.
The depression was a major success, not a failure. Okay? No, I know that sounds ridiculous, but
No, I'm listening. You're telling me that having that pain showed me deeper inside of myself how I was abandoning myself.
precisely. So maybe you want to stop calling it a failure.
Mm-hmm.
You go through your whole life like that and see how everything that you judge about yourself actually served a purpose at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But really, isn't it simple?
It is simple.
Gabor, Maté, thanks very much for coming on Under the Skin. The reason I'm so excited to talk to you, the reason that I believe you're having such an important cultural impact is because of your rare compassion and insight into the world of addiction. When it was heroin, I would reflect
Right.
after I'd used and just go, right, this isn't for me, this has got to stop, this is not a sustainable system.
You think you'd never need it anymore because you feel complete.
Mm.
And then comes the remorse of what have I done? And then you think, I don't need to do this again. And then by the time I'm home, I'm running back to the store again to get the next thing that I didn't buy. In the life of every person who's ever been addicted and ever will be addicted, there's always trauma. And addiction is any behavior that a person finds relief in the short term and craves, but suffers negative consequences and cannot give it up. That's what an addiction is. Could be drugs, obviously, alcohol, nicotine. Could also be sex, could be gambling, could be shopping, could be eating, could be pornography, could be the internet, could be gaming, could be work, could be relationships. That's what an addiction is. The first issue is not why the addiction, but why the pain. In our society, there are two myths around addiction. The pernicious one is the belief that addiction is a choice, and that the decisions that arise out of addictions are therefore a matter of individual culpability. And so therefore, addicts for the most part are punished for being addicted. Now, the other belief around addiction, but still misleading, is that it's an inherited disease. It's a biological disorder of the brain. That belief is more humane, much more than a choice belief, because at least if somebody inherits a disease, they're not to be punished for it, but they're to be provided with treatment as with any disease. However, it's also misleading because it ignores why people really get addicted, which has got nothing to do with disease. It's among the normal human responses to trauma. When people are suffering, they want to escape their suffering. That's normal.
My name is Jutaporn Sheloship. I'm 43 years old. I come from a family of Thai restaurant owners. I moved away when I was 14. I was never good enough. I mean, I think if I had parents who didn't really care and was lenient, I don't think I would have really got right into it and really got addicted. I might have just, tried it once or twice. But I think the pressure was on from the upbringing and having to feel like I had to achieve and be the best at what I did. An A student. And so when I moved away, I really wanted to prove not to just myself, but to them that I was more than what they saw. I did apply to Stanford University. That was my #1 choice. I was disappointed I didn't get in. And San Francisco State University was my second choice. And while there, I did do the same things that I was doing when I was in high school, playing for the NCAA, singing choir. with doing so many things, pledging sororities and being different club members, I'm saying I was just trying to find my way in the world. And then I started to work at the nightclubs here. And so I think that's when I really evolved, because I wanted to do everything. I wanted to go to school, wanted to work, but I needed to do homework as well. So the pressure was on then. So then it got into heavier drugs, so I needed the meth to stay up.
I think our society just doesn't understand addiction. Without the addiction, they felt incomplete. They felt this huge emptiness inside. And so the addiction was to complete themselves and to somehow temporarily cover up the emptiness. Why the finger pointing? Why the judgments on a particular group of people who are addicted who happen to use substances? My first job that I ever had as a physician in Vancouver after I did my internship was actually in the downtown east side of Vancouver. It's North America's most concentrated and most dramatic area of drug use, where there's more people injecting and ingesting and inhaling all kinds of substances than anywhere else on the planet. And I go to this old, broken down hotel with cracking paint on the walls and there were strange people walking in and out, and I felt totally at home right away. And after 2 years, I shifted my full-time work to the downtown east side. Well, so I worked there for 12 years. I mean, they all suffered tremendous torment as children, which also meant that their addictions were extreme. They were quite willing to sacrifice love, life, relationship, health, just for the next hit. They were that desperate to escape from reality because reality had been so cruel to them. We were dealing with people with severe infections. They would inject drugs that would give them abscesses, not only in their skin or their muscles, but also in their brains, in their spinal cord, in their joints. So they had to be hospitalized, which is the only facility where you can deliver IV antibiotics several times a day. But they were users. So they'd be always absconding from the hospital and even using the IV lines to inject through. So inevitably they'd be kicked out of hospital, which means that their life-threatening infections would be untreated. This is how I met Joey Carter. I think I pushed him across an intersection once in his wheelchair. Maybe that's the first time we actually met.
And you helped me up and you said, what are you doing? Enough's enough. I'm gonna admit you to CT, are you gonna go there? And I was like, well, what about my addiction? And you said, well, what are you using? And I said, well, I've been using morphine and mescaline. I said, how many will you give me a day? You said, as many as you have in your pocket.
By meeting people where they're at and treating them like human beings and not trying to change them, actually opens up the possibility of transformation for them. And Joey's a prime example.
They had come in like every 4 hours to give me my morphine.
Yeah.
And I wasn't eating it. I was saving it, right? And I woke up and there was like morphine all over the bed and I thought I was in heaven.
I do recall your poetry, and you were a very avid writer.
Yeah.
And you shared some of that with me. Is there one that that you can recite now?
Yep. It goes, I misbehave when I crave to push the venom in my veins. I lose all control of my inner soul and my demons hold the reins. I deceive whoever believes, I twist their open trust. With nefarious precision and tunnel vision, I pursue the venom with lust. With the desire so strong, I forget all bonds, hurting the ones I adore. And even though they love me, they move on from me to let me fight my war. Uncontrollable, I'm inconsolable, slowly I'm dying inside. A glutton of such, I've used too much, now there's no life in my eyes.
Wow. I want to talk to you guys about why you think you got addicted. Like, what did it do for you in the short term that you wanted or that you appreciated?
The one thing that I learned was gratification through sex. Like, it would pay my rent, it would pay my food, it would pay my clothes. but it was also feeling loved, right?
Feeling loved, right.
Having that desire for somebody to care and
I want you.
want you.
I wouldn't be able to have a sexual relationship if I wasn't using, because I couldn't feel anything towards the other person.
To make you feel more alive?
Yeah, it made me feel more in tune.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's what, and I used it to have feelings.
I didn't feel pretty, I didn't feel like, and as soon as I would do a little bit of drugs, my self-esteem would instantly go up.
I did so much sports and was on such a strict schedule that when I started to use in like grade 8, grade 9, like I was free.
So freedom, sense of aliveness, completion, self-esteem. These are all wonderful things, aren't they? When they talk about addiction being a bad choice, they know it isn't. It's actually a solution to a problem. If we understand that the addiction is not the primary problem, but really a response to trauma, then it becomes obvious that in order to heal addiction, you have to heal the trauma. But it means that you see the wound that's driving that person. Underneath that traumatized persona, there's the healthy individual who has never found expression in this life because they were never given the venue for expression, never given the relationships in which their authentic humanity could be expressed. Are we free? Are we conscious? Are we making a decision based on full awareness? Or are we driven by unconscious dynamics that we've inherited or that we developed as a response to childhood trauma? Well, insofar as we're not conscious, we're not free. We have then a social structure that induces trauma in a lot of people, therefore it induces escapist, addictive behaviors in a lot of people, and those inner trends line up with how society looks like on the outside, so therefore all this looks perfectly normal and perfectly natural. Fundamentally, the message is that with our minds we create the world. So if I have a worldview that the world is a horrible place, then I'm going to live in a world where I have to be aggressive, suspicious, competitive, and make myself as big as possible so I don't get eaten up. So I have to be grandiose and cunning, because that's the world I'm living in. And these are the people that our society rewards with power.
Do you think that the inability of these individuals to manifest real change is a demonstration that what we have are deeply entrenched and traumatized systems that are predicated on unconscious choices, unconscious drives, and that the system will not alter itself from within itself, but will sustain itself, and it's only sort of new radical ideas that can alter it?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Large segments of the economy survive because people buy things that give them temporary pleasure but do them no good whatsoever in the long term. In fact, they're even harmful. I mean, we're going so far as to destroy the earth because of our addictions. The disconnect from the body of the earth really has to do with the disconnect from our own bodies. The two are together. And the exploitation of the earth as if it was something separate from us has a lot to do with patriarchal domination. I mean, we talk about Mother Earth. Look what we're doing to Mother. It's a mother hatred almost. It speaks to a blindness and a passivity, which itself is a marker of societal and collective trauma. Our schools are full of kids with learning difficulties, mental health issues that are trauma-based, but the average teacher never gets a single lecture on trauma. They're fundamentally working with an essential lack of information. I should barely mention the criminal justice system has no understanding or even acquaintance with the concept of trauma. In fact, they often create policies that further deepen people's trauma. That these institutions need to be informed of what trauma is and how to respond to it.
Well, I've been in custodies of different states and counties since 18. I struggled with addiction, and they were sending me to these places to get the help that you needed. I had nothing but the authorities telling me it was my fault, my fault, my fault. Because you're choosing this, you know, and I can't keep choosing it. You're supposed to trust and believe in these people. California industrialized prison.
Trauma doesn't know a color. Trauma doesn't know an age. Trauma doesn't know a tax bracket. Trauma doesn't know any of these things. Anybody can be traumatized, anybody. Symptoms of trauma: nightmares and night terrors, inability to love,
addictive behavior,
insomnia, depression, shame.
That's not who you are, but it's a symptom of being traumatized. And we're here to heal each other.
We heal in community. When I do these circles with anybody, when they see the extent of childhood trauma in themselves, but also in the people around them, it's a shift. It takes the othering out. It actually brings a human in. And that, as a society, is one of the imperatives that we need to get to. We got to start seeing each other for what happened to us and not what's wrong with us.
My name is Romy Nottage. I am the Senior Director of San Francisco and Social Innovation for Downtown Streets team. That is changing the lives of people who are currently homeless through the dignity of work. Labeling people as just drug addicts, like, it's deeper than that. They probably at a younger age have been reinforced that their value is not as significant as others. The pain is the root cause of people trying to feel comfortable in this world. Using street drugs is a method. It is a behavior to support something that is uncomfortable.
I was homeless for about 15 years. It is the survival of the fittest. I had 3 kids on the street while homeless, walking around, no shoes, selling drugs, doing drugs, hoping they would miscarry. All the babies came out with everything: meth, crystal, cocaine, everything you could think of. I did utilize those 3 moments in time where I had those babies to just rest up in a nice place and eat a hot meal. Just basically took a shower those 3 times, because while I was homeless, most of us don't shower, maybe once a year, if that. But I was lucky. I had the same foster mom. All 3 boys, Albert, Judson, and James, are all thriving. They're very healthy. I did fight for them. Don't get me wrong. I did try to fight for them, but I wasn't ready to give up the drug life.
It was fall, so it was the rain season. I just remember that constant worry about where was I gonna go that night? Would I find shelter? Because there's nowhere to go, right? The people that did love me just said, you know what, we're not gonna stand by anymore while you kill yourself. We can't do it. It's hurting more. We're dying a harder death than you are. And they just scattered from my life. I was utterly alone.
I've been in the city on the streets now for 4 years. Went to college on my GI Bill. I was in the Army for a total of 11 years. Then I got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I retired. My PTSD comes from experiences with trying to beat this monkey on my back, you know? I've had the beautiful home and vehicles and wife and kids and thrown it all away for drugs.
So when you pass by someone homeless on the street, that is such a painful world to live in. And a very important thing to do is acknowledge them and not pretending or literally thinking that no one's sitting right there.
How are you doing? Hanging in there? Had a rough sleep last night? You stay in the TL?
I do.
Yeah, cool. How long have you been here?
I moved here from Atlanta February the 7th.
The number one thing that people who are experiencing homelessness suffer from is feeling looked down on. It's like people just passing by them, not acknowledging their experience. That forms an identity that is internalized. Their sense of self has been attacked. Their dignity has been completely reinforced as non-existent every single day. Humanization of homelessness is where we need to start, because we're working with people, we're working with nervous systems, we are working with deflated and traumatized senses of self. To be honest, if I lived in that world, I would want to use too. It'd get me out of it. It'd make me feel not like that for a minute.
Hey, Dwayne, you home? It's Tessa. Hey, how are you?
How are you?
I'm Tessa. I'm a harm reduction specialist at Abode Housing Services. I help people move through the pain of their addiction and regain dignity. So, oh my gosh, your place looks amazing! I took this job because of the harm reduction approach where people get housing. You don't have an agenda, you must do this or that in order to access housing. You're worthy of housing because housing should be a right. When people get housed after they've been outdoors for 7, 15, 25 years, whatever the number is, you're alone. You don't have survival to do. So this is when I'm starting to see everybody's pain start surfacing. And people are starting to have, more challenges and emotional challenges than they did out on the streets. Dr. Gabor Maté, when I found his teachings and specifically the realm of the hungry ghost, kind of changed my outlook in life. I'm very dear to this work.
I'm Gabor's wife, and I have been for close to 50 years. I met Gabor in October of 1967 when I was a first-year student at UBC. I saw in the student newspaper that they were looking for cartoonists, and I draw. I walked into this small room, and he's sitting there reading a book, and I said, my name's Ray. I'm supposed to draw you. Would you mind just sitting there? This is it. I did this before I knew who he was, before I'd had a conversation. What a mysterious guy. Dark, intense. He was so interesting to me.
I've always been a rebel. I mean, in communist Hungary, in grade 6, my teacher wrote in my report card that you should watch it because he incites the other students. But so that tendency to resist arbitrariness, what I'm being told and what the official line is. So I'm really not one for groupthink, and it really helps me to see through all kinds of nonsense that people accept without questioning. On a personal level, I'm also a contradiction. My longing is really a sense of being excluded from something, a sense of impossibility even, and I very easily go there. I mean, that is my baseline.
Very early in my meeting with Gabor, I saw clearly the light that he was and the dark that he was. So I saw brilliance and I saw real, I guess trauma is the word I'd use now, but I didn't know then. To me, it was dark. And of course, by then I knew he was directly had been in the Holocaust. But it was going to be my job to heal him, to bring out that light. I really believe that the purpose of marriage is to actually go back to the original trauma, which comes from the family. I married a man who was so much like my father.
My scientific interest as well has been having to do with my own trauma. Because in my 40s, I was a very successful physician, and I was a national columnist for a Canadian newspaper, and I was the head of the palliative care department at a major Canadian hospital, and I was depressed and alienated in a difficult marriage, and my children were scared of me, and I didn't like being alive.
Well, there's just nothing more frustrating to be in a situation to see him out there doing this amazing work, just the healing and the wisdom and the support, and then come home and be completely exhausted, irritable, and then I get the negativity. I have to be me. I have to be authentic. My nervous system is so wired that if I'm not authentic to myself, I'm sick. I have a stomach ache. I can't sleep. I'm anxious. And it's usually here. It's usually something in this dynamic.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, when I would compulsively shop for compact discs and lie about it, Ray would get neck aches. And after a while, she figured out, if I got a neck ache, this guy's lying to me.
He doesn't get away with anything.
Yeah.
How are you, Gabor Maté, not processing your trauma?
How am I not posting it?
Yeah, because like if you're not doing it, that's like Steve Jobs going, I couldn't get my phone to work.
That's another traumatized person, by the way, whose cancer has everything to do with the childhood trauma that he experienced. But that's another book and another story.
So you sort of a bit like in The Matrix when Neo sees everything's made out of numbers. You look at people and you see all their trauma and damage.
That's what I see. Until I realized that I was traumatized, which really wasn't in my late 30s and mid 40s. And I began to realize that it didn't have to be this way, that there were reasons for it, and I started looking for those reasons. So I started waking up fairly late in life. I was a driven workaholic doctor. Now, why was I a driven workaholic doctor? Because the message I got as an infant is that the world didn't want me. Now, how do you deal with not being wanted? You make yourself needed. So if you're traumatized and if you don't think you're lovable, my God, go to medical school. Now they're going to want you all the time. When they're dying, when they're being born, every moment in between. And that's highly addictive because you get the validation all the time. A lot of people that go into medicine, the last thing they want is to be open and vulnerable. In fact, what they want is the authority of the white coat and the stethoscope. And medical school is very hard on people. You might look at it almost as a selection process that weeds out the people that are too vulnerable. The long hours, the deference to unreasonable authority, the stress that you are willing to subject yourself to. And these are the people that, like me, become physicians. So that selects out against the vulnerable. I went to medical school here at UBC. At that time, we did not get a single lecture of trauma. We did not even hear the word. They still don't hear the word trauma in medical school. So I've looked at the whole range of human experience from birth to death, because I've worked in obstetrics and I've worked in palliative care and everything else in between. The modern medical paradigm in practice separates mind from the body, and it separates the individual from the environment. So when you look at that there's an epidemic of asthma right now in North America, more and more kids are being diagnosed with it, it's all about, or largely about, the increasing stress in our society. So it's a cultural manifestation. And this is completely missing in medical practice. If you look Black Americans are more likely to get prostate cancer and more likely to die of it, and not because of lack of medical care. But maybe there's something about being a minority in this particular culture that is so highly stressful that it deranges the immune system. If you look at that asthmatic Afro-American woman, is that asthma a manifestation of her own pathology? Or is it reflecting a social malaise? Which means the emotion, whatever you experienced, probably suppressed rage or shame, whatever you experienced, actually affects the physiology of your lungs. Medicine is very interesting that way. If you go to a dermatologist with an inflamed skin, what kind of cream are they going to give you? Anybody know? Steroid cream, right. If you go to a rheumatologist with an inflamed joint, what medication are they going to give you? Steroid very often. If you go to a lung specialist with asthma, what kind of inhaler are you going to get? Steroid. If you go to a gastroenterologist with inflamed intestines, what kind of medication are you going to get? Steroids. No, what are steroids? They're copies of cortisol. What is cortisol? It's a stress hormone. We're treating everything with stress hormones. Maybe it should occur to us that stress has something to do with the onset of these conditions. The fundamental problem is capitalism, or I should say materialism. As long as research is driven by the profits of pharmaceutical companies, what's going to drive the education of physicians except the profit motive of pharmaceutical companies? I mean, just obvious. People have to be seen as automatons, as beings without really emotional needs or spiritual needs. As globalization and globalized materialism spreads throughout the world, so is autoimmune disease spreading throughout the world in societies that hardly even knew them before. Diseases, whether mental or physical, are normal responses to abnormal circumstances. And that what we consider normal in this society is often actually insane. In the most health-obsessed human society ever, all is not well. In the US, the richest society in history, fully half of the citizens have a chronic disorder such as high blood pressure or diabetes. Illness is when part of an organism starts working against the overall benefit of the organism. So that, say, in an autoimmune disease, the immune system attacks the host organism. So a system that was designed by nature to protect you now turns against you. Cell division, which is meant to be, coordination with the needs of the entire organism, gets out of hand, and now you've got cancer. The search is always to find out what's wrong with the individual cell, or how you kill the abnormal cells. So the treatment is restricted to the biological plane. We either cut it out, or we poison it, or we burn it. That's our approach to treating cancer. Most chronic illness is a way of the body saying no when a person suppressed their nose in order to fit in. I'm saying is that when an illness comes along, we can just look upon it as a nuisance to get rid of and an enemy to fight. Or we can say, okay, well, it's here now, what's the teaching? Which just doesn't mean that we don't accept treatment or we don't do our best to heal, but that as part of that healing process, we actually ask ourselves, what does this mean about my life and my relationships, and particularly about how I treat myself? What is the teaching?
My name is Tim. I'm 51 years old. I was given a diagnosis of prostate cancer about 1.5 years ago. We actually had a full radical prostatectomy. So that means the whole removal of my prostate, which was no walk in the park. It's quite an extensive surgery. In October, they did a bone scan and found that there was multiple areas in my spine, ribs, and some pelvis that the cancer had metastasized to, which was devastating to me at the time. There was no need for me to have the operation. If someone has prostate cancer and they have their prostate removed, but the cancer's still in their body, then the surgery hasn't done any good. there was no root cause analysis of why I got it. What I soon discovered was that everything was a Band-Aid.
The average general practitioner under the insurance programs gets to see a person for 6 minutes, and a psychiatrist gets to see them for 10 minutes. What can you do in 10 minutes? You can adjust medications. And the average psychiatrist today is not trained in psychotherapy. They're trained in what's called biological psychiatry, which fundamentally means altering the biology of the brain by handing out prescriptions, which never get to the heart of the problem. So while I'm not dogmatically opposed to medications, on the contrary, I acknowledge their value in my own life, they're not the answer. And at the very best, they should be only as a stopgap measure until we get to work on the real issues. Why this disease? Why in this person? And why now? Unless I answer those questions, unless I ask those questions, we can't talk about wholeness. We can't talk about healing in the deepest sense.
I grew up in a family with a father who was very angry and never even realized it, because for me it was just natural and normal. As a kid, I didn't know any different. And I was very scared. Anytime I acted out in anger, it always backfired. So I could never express that anger. So I decided to go more on a healing journey myself and try to find out what could I do myself to be able to maybe cure this thing, or at least live longer, feel better, and address it at many different levels. So I turned to ayahuasca mainly because of the anxiety and realizing, like, what's a deeper spiritual reason that I got this diagnosis? Why did I get this cancer? I got more out of ayahuasca in one journey than I probably did in 5 years of psychoanalysis.
What I know about ayahuasca and the healing of addiction. Ayahuasca being an Amazonian brew, which has got psychedelic qualities. It can induce visions and deep experiences. So there was a ceremony here led by a Peruvian shaman, and within half an hour of having ingested the brew, it felt very much real. It felt very much like me, but it was new, because I experienced a state of such deep love and gratitude, such as I had not recalled experiencing before. And I saw that all my own addictive behaviors were driven precisely because I hadn't been able to experience that kind of love and that kind of gratitude. That from that state, there's no need to look for anything else outside of yourself. And I also learned very shortly that the ayahuasca has the power to teach people about their trauma, to actually show them what happened to them. All of a sudden, oh yes, this is what happened. This is how I decided that life is unbearable. This is how I decided that I wasn't lovable. This is how I decided that I had to soothe myself from the outside because there was no peace inside. And immediately I said, I'm going to work with this. And once you start working with one psychedelic, then you become aware that there's a whole world out there, and there's a whole resurgence now in the healing powers of psychedelic modalities, and so there are other substances. The deep therapeutic potential of psychedelics resides in the fact that they get the conditioned mind out of the way. So people have access to two aspects of reality that they're usually not in touch with. One is the deep trauma and pain that they're carrying that they can actually look at now. And in the appropriate, compassionate, safe context, they can experience these troubled emotions and mind states without having to be driven into insanity or having to escape. If you're going to use psychedelics, it has to be combined with very adept therapy at the same time. So in my work with him tomorrow, we'll be using one of these modalities to see if he can be guided deep into himself, so that some answers may emerge for the existential and life issues that he's facing. Hey, Tim.
Hi, Gabor.
Come in. How are you?
Good, thank you.
You all set?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay, come on in. The medication will take about half an hour to take effect. When you're ready, just ingest it. You've been diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Correct.
And stage 4 means that it's spread to elsewhere in the body?
Yes, it's spread to bone. Places in my spine, pelvis, and ribs.
In my view, people that develop cancer tend to be nice people who are more concerned with the emotional needs of others than their own. They have a hard time expressing healthy anger. And also they have this belief that they must not disappoint anybody. How do you feel when you perceive that somebody is not seeing you, is not listening to you?
I felt very sad. And probably a bit of a tinge of anger there too as well. Yeah.
So how about we rephrase that?
Anger.
Yeah.
I felt anger.
What do you feel in your body when you say those things? Just check in with your body. What's happening there?
I feel a little bit energized from it. Just saying it, yeah, absolutely. I feel a little bit more awake.
So notice how you deprive yourself of energy. Okay.
That makes me just really sad just thinking about that. Man, it feels good to feel. And underneath that, I just feeling this frustration. Fuck, it's too much energy to. I've been holding on to contain that. Like I'm pissed off. I have to keep fucking focusing on all this shit, working on myself. Fucking tired of it.
So what is the thing that you need to keep your mind off by trying to figure everything out?
This little boy that just wants to be loved and accepted unconditionally wasn't. And so he's had to figure out how to be accepted and loved by others, and even my internal judge. This little brat when I was angry.
You can stop all this work. You can just actually just be here and with whatever there is. See, as long as you don't allow the fear to be there, you're going to be always working to get rid of it. That's what the work is all about. All the work that you're doing. And then you're going to keep working to make yourself acceptable and always nice and dutiful and all that. Or you could say, okay, the fear's there. I'll let it be there. I'm big enough to, there's enough space here for it to be a part of me.
It just seems too easy.
Yeah, it's got to be a lot more complicated than that. I developed a method of therapy or exploration with people called compassionate inquiry, the essence of which is the belief that the truth is inside all of us. We just have to ask the right questions to help people arrive at the truth. That clenched jaw could speak, what would it say now?
I don't want this anymore.
What is the this that you don't want?
That's what I don't know.
Look, if we didn't shut our mouth like this, what is it that wants to come out that we're not letting out?
Rage.
Yeah, that is the inquiry. How do you feel about that?
I think there's a few feelings associated with that.
I'm not buying that one. How do you feel towards it? How do you feel about that? I'm a part of you. How do you feel about that? What comes up right now?
Shame.
Thank you. What are you ashamed about? Do you know?
That it is a weakness.
And you must not be weak.
Correct.
Because if you're weak, then what?
I won't be able to take care of those I love.
So you located it, it's here in the chest area. Just put your attention on it right now. I mean, I'm looking at this blockage or sense of blockage, okay? What does it want to say to you?
It's not a word, it's soothing.
It's soothing.
Yeah. Desiring.
That it's wanting soothing?
Yeah.
If you're in touch with this sense here that you've just identified, how familiar is it to you?
Oh, very.
How far does it go back?
7. That's when I lost my mother, but it was present before that.
Okay. So what does it need from you?
To be held.
Need to be held.
Yeah.
Like your mother might have held you.
Yeah.
So when it arises, my advice is don't try and figure out how better to do your work, or how better to be present, or any of that, or how will I fulfill my calling. Your calling is really clear. But this part of you, guess what? Needs to be heard and seen.
Alrighty.
Okay? Yeah?
That makes sense.
That's good. Any questions?
I think I'm just supposed to feel right now.
Well, that's good. That means you're paying attention. Yeah. What do he called you something?
Oh yeah, he called
you
me
a
monster. He's
right.
called me delusional.
How do you feel when he calls you a monster?
I mean, I feel hurt.
Pain?
I feel angry.
Okay. So what if I said to you, you got beautiful green hair? How would you feel about that?
Laugh.
Why would you laugh? Why would you laugh?
Because I know my hair's not green.
Uh-huh. What if I said you were a monster?
The feeling of the anxiety was so strong that I wanted to end it.
Anything familiar about any of that?
Are you trying to go back to childhood trauma?
Who? Me? You see that you developed a belief that I can't be touched, nothing can touch me.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what happens when you get sick?
Mm-hmm.
That defense is now destroyed.
Wow.
I ask people to tell me some recent episode when they're upset with somebody with their lives. And something that they're open to sharing. So it doesn't have to be anything sordid or thing, but just something, whether it's your spouse, partner, the bus driver, I don't care who.
Sure.
A friend. Okay, so what happened?
Describe it?
What happened, yeah.
All right, there were a number of issues in my home, and I had hired someone to do these things while I was gone.
Okay.
And I came back and none of them were fixed.
Okay, and your emotional reaction was?
Anger.
Anything else besides anger?
I was disappointed.
Disappointed is sadness.
Let's go with that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a silly question. What were you sad and angry about?
Well, angry that someone had made commitments to me and not fulfilled those commitments.
What does that mean that they didn't fulfill their commitments?
Meant that they didn't care about me. They didn't they didn't respect me.
So they didn't care about you and didn't respect you. What kind of person doesn't get cared or respected?
I don't know. Someone who doesn't deserve to be cared for or respected.
Exactly. Are there other reasons why this other person might not have done the work that has nothing to do with him or her not caring about him or not respecting him? So what other reasons might there be?
He had a flight delay and got caught on Puerto Rico during a hurricane.
Yeah, he's got ADHD.
Yeah.
He can't follow through. And any number of possibilities.
Yeah.
Now, of all the possibilities that you've just outlined, including that they don't care about you or respect you, which is the worst one?
The one I immediately defaulted to.
So let's notice something. I should say we, because we're all like this, we don't respond to what happens. We respond to our perception of what happens.
Right.
Okay? That's what the Buddha said. It's with our minds we create the world. Number two, of all the possible interpretations, we choose the worst one. Thirdly, what I just said isn't true. We didn't choose it. It's not like you went through all these possibilities and you said...
It wasn't multiple choice and I chose option D.
Oh no, he doesn't care about me. He doesn't respect me. You didn't do that. Your brain jumped there automatically, right? The question is why? First time in your life that you felt hurt and angry that when you perceived somebody didn't care about you or didn't respect you?
It's not the first time.
Very good. And most people I talk to, it goes back way back.
Yeah, this goes way back.
Into childhood. Okay? And that's what trauma is. We don't respond to the present moment. We respond to the past. So who's the one that doesn't care about you and who's the one that doesn't think you're worthy of respect?
No, it'd be me.
It'd be you.
Yeah.
Now that's a learning. And that's the beauty of healing, is that when you reframe things and you actually see the source within ourselves, all of a sudden, that's liberating. Because guess what? If you're feeling that way because this guy did this or didn't do that, that makes you a victim.
Yep.
But if you see that you're the source, now you're powerful. Can we have a vision of society that incorporates the achievements of modern civilization while at the same time still honors the essence of human nature? I think the answer is yes. I know the answer is yes. Not that I expect to see it in my lifetime. We need trauma-informed medical care, trauma-informed education, and trauma-informed therapy.
Everybody that has listened to talk or read his book always said to me, I don't feel like I'm a bad person anymore. I can see their heads higher. Yeah, they're still using substances, but something inside of them is starting to change. That's their shame is kind of dissipating.
Without me stumbling across his work, I tell you, I would have been a different person. Childhood trauma is key because once you understand that, you know you were a child and you didn't have help, and if it's about love, then why are we locking them up? Underneath that traumatized persona, there's the healthy individual who has never found expression in this life. If you see that, then you're trauma-informed. It's not a question of healing the trauma or of ever getting rid of the memory of what happened, but to help that person expand so that there's space for all those emotions.
Dr. Maté, he allowed me to feel that what I was seeing was a humanistic crisis. It was a human not being identified in the light in which they deserve to be. We as caretakers in this world need to see the human in front of us, not the problem.
We still have each other's numbers,
Yeah,
so call me.
yes.
Okay.
All right, good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, good to see you.
Bye. How have you been?
It cannot be a general construct of this is how we're dealing with people who are homeless. This is how we are dealing with people who are addicted to drugs. No, this is how we deal with Sarah. This is how we deal with Jose. This is how we are in relationship to each and every person experiencing trauma within their lives. That is what has been the essence to his teaching for me.
Hi, who's this? Hi, Fang. How are you doing? Fang, are you his little companion?
When we start the journey of being compassionate with ourselves, not only does it change ourselves, it changes our communities and our society.
Today, I'm still healing. I'm still healing from my abandonment issues. I'm a lifer inmate. Being here today, witnessing all you guys' traumatic experiences gives me motivation, gives me inspiration to continue on the path that I'm currently on.
Every human being has a true, genuine, authentic self. And that true, genuine, authentic self can never be destroyed.
When people say you have a second chance in life, today I know what that means. So I performed for the first time singing after not singing in 20 years. So I performed in front of 400 people, and that was a dream come true. And I was able to reunite with my mother. When God blessed me with this son, my 4-year-old boy, Douglas, I made a promise to myself and I said, listen, I want to be a mom. I want to be a good mom. The baby's dad is also with me. He's my babysitter.
I've been clean for the last 10 and a half months. Because you did, you made a difference in my life.
Thank you for being in touch.
Through the mist and the pain, I've learned to maintain. There is no shame. There is no shame.
I am happy to say now that through my own healing, after being off my medication now for 6 months, I've got a remission. The cancer is just not growing. This is the first time in 4 years where this has happened, so this is just absolutely amazing.
It's been spiritual work for us both, and I've grown up in the relationship. I've healed in the relationship. I'm still healing in the relationship. To me, this is an incredible love story. It's really inspiring how he's changed. So as we've gotten older, somehow we've gotten freer and younger. We just get closer and closer. It gets better and better.
It's through a dynamic, emergent process of confrontation with the truth that solutions will arise. Trauma involves a lifelong pushing down, a tremendous expenditure of energy into not feeling the pain. As we heal, that same energy is liberated for life and for being in the present. So the energy of trauma can be transformed into the energy of life.
You can see it in the cars, it's playing on the radio, it's written in the stars and living in me. You can read it in the cards and hear it in stereo. It's a bullet in your heart and a trigger in me. You can see it in the young, they saw it on the video, loaded like a gun, it's aiming at me. Everybody on the run, talking on the telephone, hurry up and have fun, 'cause it's killing me. Over and over and over once again, they will find you, you let them know. Over and over once again, they will find you.
So I had the good fortune that some filmmakers wanted to make a film about my work, which I wasn't very gracious about, but I agreed, and it became this movie called The Wisdom of Trauma. And it's been seen by now close to 8 million people in 200 or more countries in the world. So it's got quite a response. And when we showed the film online, I also had the great fortune of interviewing a lot of wonderful people, indigenous people from North America and from Greenland, trauma experts like Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine, famous singers and actors, psychologists, experts in pain who understand that physical pain is often a sign of psychological distress, child developmental experts who understand about the needs of children and what children require for healthy development, people like Esther Perel, who deals with relationships and human sexuality. Now they're available as a package that Unity has put together. And along with that is a package of some of my teachings around trauma and what we can learn from trauma, and the mind-body unity and compassionate inquiry. So all this is now available, and I'm very excited that this is now being presented to an international audience. And I invite all of you that if you find my words making any sense at all, you might want to check out this package, and I'm convinced that you'll get a lot from it.
It's a devil in disguise. It's hidden in the media. It's a hunger